Hello. Today we are pre-recording the class because there are students here from Brazil meeting with Olavo. And Alessandro will be helping them with their class during the time of my normal broadcast. So I will explain some of this text, but we cannot take any comments or questions today. So we are on page 46 of the Living Principle, and last class we spent a great deal of time talking about the general context of this passage, leading us to understand something more about the living principle. And we ended the class with this quote, which is actually a quote from Olavo when he was speaking to me and we were discussing this portion of Levis. And Olavo said, the whole of literature is a search for the living principle, the higher law, known only as a search, uncodifiable, a deeper understanding of human reality. And I mentioned that throughout the reading of this book, I have had difficulty understanding what is meant by the living principle. Levis continues to assert, to claim, and to state that this is difficult to explain, impossible to pin down. This is something that you know within your heart, but you can't really communicate it. And as I was speaking to Olavo, I began to see that it is understanding of the reality behind the reality that we can see. We see a certain reality which is material and which is on the surface, but there is more. So let us continue with Levis and see if we can shed a little bit more light on the topic. I'm going to begin to read at page 46 after the extended quote, beginning with the words, "With what sureness?" Okay? Beginning at page 46, last full paragraph. With what sureness Conrad has tackled here in his creative writer's thought the problem, lives and life, that was for Dickens in Little Dorrit at the center of his profoundly deliberated undertaking, that being an inquest into contemporary society. The young captain and the fugitive from justice are, as they have to be, two separate centers of sentience, two identities. But the way in which, while never ceasing to be conscious of the separateness, we are made to think of the fugitive as the captain's double. Quote, "It might very well have been myself who had done that. In a sense, it is myself who has." Makes the young Conrad, captain, for us, in the testing situation, the presence of life, the race, as human responsibility focused in the individual being, one who so patently knows that he does not belong to himself. Let's begin with that paragraph. Okay. It begins with the phrase, "with what sureness Conrad had tackled here, ... Usually the word what indicates a question, but in this case it does not. We've got to get rid of this marker. It's not dark. With what sureness? How about this? How wonderful is your work, O Lord. Here we have how, usually a question word. Here we have what, usually a question word. Sometimes we use these to make an emphatic statement. With what sureness simply means he is speaking with a great degree of certainty. Just like how wonderful is means it is very wonderful. With what sureness means how sure is it? It's sure. So, it's not a question. It means Conrad has tackled this problem with confidence, with certainty, without uncertainty and instability. Okay? So, with what sureness Conrad has tackled here in his creative writer's thought the problem. Okay? Tackled. In football, when someone jumps on someone and knocks them to the floor, he has tackled him. To tackle means to wrestle and prevail over, to push it down and hold it tight. So, with what sureness has Conrad tackled, meaning dominated and succeeded over, this problem in his creative writer's thought? In his creative writer's thought refers to the mode. Conrad is tackling a problem by means of exploring it through creative fiction. So, there is a problem which Conrad is actually exhibiting to us and showing us and clarifying for us through his creative fiction. And he is doing it without any difficulty, without any uncertainty. The problem, lives and life, that was for Dickens in Little Dorrit at the center of his profoundly deliberated undertaking. Let us think back and remember for a moment our discussion of Little Dorrit. In Little Dorrit, the concept of life was linked with creativity. The idea was, yes, we have biological life, but if there is no creativity, then the biological life is not true, capital L, life. And Levis spoke of this problem of what makes human life distinct. He called it life and lives, lives and life. There are many characteristics or principles that can be drawn forth and equated with life. I mentioned in a former class that Americans feel that freedom is such a value that if you have no freedom, you're not really living. And you could think of others. In different cultures, we define life differently. But creativity, freedom, and other principles that are characteristic of human life. So, in Little Dorrit, Dickens was exploring into the principle of life and coming out with creativity. He was exploring into the living principle and pulling out one aspect that he could show to the world. And this was deliberate, not accidental. Dickens knew what he was doing, according to Levis. According to Levis, it was Dickens' thesis that life is identified with creativity, or a key theme, at the very least, of Little Dorrit. Okay? So, with what sureness Conrad has tackled here meaning in The Secret Sharer, in the short story, in his creative writer's thought, the problem, lives and life, the problem really is the living principle. The living principle, which for us at this point we are defining as the deeper reality beyond the human reality that we can see and explain. And since we can't explain it easily in prose, it can be evoked through creative fiction or narrated so as to evoke the appropriate perceptions in a person. Like when I told the story of Tarcissus and the Eucharist to my son Toby, age 4, and he conceived within his heart the desire to lay down his life for the sacred thing. So this is all part of the living principle, the principle of life, which is beyond what we can easily explain. Okay, so with what sureness Conrad has tackled here in his creative writer's thought the problem, lives and life, that was for Dickens in Little Dorrit at the center of his profoundly deliberated undertaking. Profoundly means deeply. Deliberated means intentional. It was not by accident that he stumbled upon his insights in Little Dorrit. It was intentional. An undertaking is a task. It is a project. It is a large job that must be done, that you take on yourself. So the writing of a novel, like Little Dorrit, would be an undertaking. A profoundly deliberated undertaking in the case of Little Dorrit. Okay? That being an inquest into contemporary society. Now, that being indicates that the problem, which is the... Okay, let me do it this way. The problem which is also equated with lives and life. By the way, here is a pronunciation note. Listen to my pronunciation of these two words. Lives, life. Lives, life. Lives, life. Phonetically, these words are very similar. They both begin with the L, and then they both have the I, and then V and F in English. V is made by the lip on the teeth and air. V. F is made with the exact same structure, but no voice. V. So this one is voiced. This one is unvoiced. That is the only difference between those consonants. Now, when we actually pronounce this, we usually drop the voicing. So we end up pronouncing it very much like this. So what makes the difference to the hearer is the length of the vowel and the quality of the vowel. In this case, we have the full I. In this case, and it is elongated. Lives, lives. In this case, we have a, what we call, well, it's a more closed form and it is shortened. Instead of I say I, I. And I also shorten it. So this is lives, and this is life. Lives, life, lives, life. So the difference in pronunciation is not here at all. These two are pronounced exactly the same in an unvoiced manner. The difference between these words from a pronunciation point of view is in the length of the vowel and in the quality. This is open, lives. This one is closed, life. Lives, life. Okay? A lot of misunderstanding comes with speakers of Romance languages into English because they don't understand how to make the difference. Whenever you have the vowel I before a voiced consonant, you pronounce it elongated and open. Live. I'm trying to think of some others. Well, anyway. And whenever you have the vowel I before an unvoiced consonant such as T or K, excuse me, you close it up and shorten it. Life, light, like. And supposing we had the voiced counterpart. Thank you! It would be lied. Yeah, it's like past tense of to lie. He lied. So so it didn't shed light on the matter. He failed to shed light because he lied. And like and lig. There's no word lig, but you can hear the like. So, all right, so much for pronunciation. Lives and life. So, back to this. The problem, which is equated with the phrase lives and life, and that was at the center of Dickens' Little Dorrit. Center. We spell it E-R. The British people spell it R-E. That's why in the book it's R-E. But I spell it R-E. Center of Little Dorrit. All three of these equal the same thing. That being. This phrase sums up what came before into a package and equates it with the last thing. That being. An inquest into contemporary society. So the phrase that being means what came before is what comes after. So this phrase gathers all this up and says all of that is this. And what is this? An inquest into contemporary society. Now remember, we want to understand what the living principle is. And the living principle is equated with lives and life. An inquest is an investigation. It's a very careful, thorough investigation. So, all of these things represent an investigation into contemporary society in order to come out with a characteristic that you can say, this is what life is. This is what is truly important. This is the value. This is the higher principle. Okay? And in the case of the secret sharer, it will probably have something to do with human responsibility as the value. In Little Dorrit, it was creativity. To Patrick Henry, a famous American, it was freedom. To Conrad, in The Secret Sharer, the value is human responsibility. There are others as well that we can discern from other works of great literature and also from our own heart. But we'll continue. The young captain and the fugitive from justice are, as they have to be, two separate centers of sentience, two identities. Okay? So we have the captain, identity, remember? A pinpoint of location out of which channels something else, a higher principle. So we have two of them. We have the captain and the fugitive, two separate centers of sentience. They have to be separate. It says, they are, as they have to be, two separate centers of sentience. That phrase, as they have to be, means that something in the system will not work if they are not separate. They have been called a double. But in order for what Conrad is talking about to be clear, it must be clear that they are separate. They are not the same. So when the captain says, in a sense, it could have been me who did it. In a sense, it was me. He is not saying we are the same person. They must be, for the sake of the argument, separate. Two separate centers of sentience. Two identities. But means something different is coming. The way in which, while never ceasing to be conscious of the separateness, we are made to think of the fugitive as the captain's double, makes the young Conrad captain for us, in the testing situation, the presence of life, the race, as human responsibility focused in the individual being, one who so patently knows he does not belong to himself. Okay, this is a really long sentence. Let's take it bit by bit and then put it all together at the end. Starting with the word but. The way in which, I'm going to skip the phrase in between, we are made to think of the fugitive as the captain's double. I'm going to write down the core of the sentence. The way, okay, they are separate. Is the first portion of the sentence. But the way in which we are made to see them as doubles. Okay? All of that is the subject of the next idea. They are separate, but the way in which we're made to see them as doubles makes the captain, the presence of life, makes the captain representative of the race, humanity. The race is the human race, humanity. And as human responsibility focused in the individual. These are all phrases for the same thing. Focused in the individual, one who knows he does not belong to himself. Knows. I'm going to say he isn't his own. And all of these have the captain becoming for us the representative human being, the representative of the living principle, every man. Okay, now, all of these phrases mean the same thing, and they all fit in the same place in the sentence. Hold on one second. I just need to get a glass of water. Okay, so that is where the sentence is going. Let's look a little more closely at what we left out. Okay, so the young captain and the fugitive from justice are, as they have to be, two separate centers of sentience. Two identities, but the way in which, while never ceasing to be conscious of separateness, we are made to think of the fugitive as the captain's double. Okay. Right here, human responsibility is a key concept. It requires two individuals. One, to take responsibility for the other. So, while never ceasing to be cognizant that they are separate, we are made to see them as one. This is part of the device which exemplifies the human responsibility. It's a literary device used by Conrad to evoke the experience of responsibility and to exemplify it, make it easy to see. Okay? Never ceasing to be conscious of the separateness, we are made to think of the fugitive as the captain's double. And then, of course, we have the same quote we're very familiar with. It might very well have been myself who had done that. In a sense, it is myself who has. That's where Conrad employs the device. He enables the reader to remember that they are separate but see them as one in that quote. So by employing that device, it makes the young Conrad captain. I think here by calling it Conrad captain, they are suggesting that Conrad himself, as author, identifies with the captain. That Conrad is putting himself into the role of captain. So the young Conrad captain, for us, it's going to show to us, in the testing situation. In other words, the Conrad captain is not every man throughout the entire story. He is not a representative of the living principle in every point in the story. It is only in the testing situation when he realizes that this fugitive could be him and that he must do unto this man as he would hope others would do unto him, where he takes responsibility, where he knows what his duty is in spite of the codified law he'll have to break in order to do his duty. In that test, he becomes, for us, the representative of human responsibility, the representative of the living principle, the representative of the race. Only in the testing situation is the young Conrad captain every man. At that point in time, Conrad, in his creative writer's thought, is pulling forth from his own experience something he knows about deeper human reality. And that is that we must take responsibility for others as we would like it to be taken for us. The golden rule. As Aula says, an author writes in response to the second commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. He writes in order to understand, in order to love his fellow man. So, the Conrad captain becomes every man when he puts himself into that test and draws from his own intuitive understanding the principle of human responsibility and has the character act on it instead of following the code of the law. So, The sentence. The young captain and the fugitive from justice are, as they have to be, two separate centers of sentience, two identities. But the way in which, while never ceasing to be conscious of the separateness, we are made to think of the fugitive as the captain's double, it might very well have been myself who had done that. In a sense, it is myself who has. Makes the young Conrad captain, for us, in the testing situation, the presence of life, the race, as human responsibility focused in the individual being, one who so patently knows that he does not belong to himself. Okay, the final one we actually didn't write up here, and I don't have room to write it, is one who so patently knows that he does not belong to himself. Now remember, a page ago we talked about Lawrence saying that he writes out of a moral sense for the race. And also, earlier than that, we said that I'm trying to remember the person who spoke of his paintings as not coming from himself. Blake, speaking of his paintings, said, "It is mine, but it's not mine." I don't actually see the quote, but I know it was Blake. So, remember, this was the hallmark of any great creative artist, that they are a channel of something that is not themselves, speaking through them to the world, a capital T truth that comes through the creative writer's art and goes into the world. Well, here, the captain himself knows that he does not belong to himself. He is the agent of justice. He has to be the agent of justice. Otherwise, the fugitive will be punished wrongly, and it won't be justice. It will be justice according to the code, but not according to the higher law. And so the captain himself becomes the means of justice. At that moment, he does not belong to himself, and it is his responsibility to do what is right. He's the one in the position to do it. He is the one with the authority and the responsibility. So, one who so patently knows, patently in this context means clearly and without any uncertainty, knows that he does not belong to himself. He must function as an agent of the higher reality. So, let's read the whole paragraph again and see if it is clear. With what sureness Conrad has tackled here in his creative writer's thought the problem, lives and life, that was for Dickens in Little Dorrit at the center of his profoundly deliberated undertaking, that being an inquest into contemporary society. The young captain and the fugitive from justice are, as they have to be, two separate centers of sentience, two identities, but the way in which, while never ceasing to be conscious of the separateness, we are made to think of the fugitive as the captain's double. It might very well have been myself who had done that. in a sense, it is myself who has, makes the young Conrad captain for us in the testing situation the presence of life, the race, as human responsibility focused in the individual being, one who so patently knows that he does not belong to himself. So, all of this is Levis's commentary on, it's actually Levis commenting on his own commentary of Conrad in The Secret Sharer. So Levis is commenting on his commentary of The Secret Sharer. And if you think back, it's all about Levis's theme. Levis's theme is the living principle. And Conrad's story, The Secret Sharer, is a wonderful example from literature of how a creative writer looks into the reality of humanity and pulls out a lesson and holds it up for the rest of humanity to see and understand and learn. And in the case of Conrad's The Secret Sharer, the portion of the living principle which is being exemplified is that there is a law above the law. And that in this case, that law is human responsibility toward another. Responsibility to do justice, even if the law says you should do something which would be unjust. And a human being has the ability to perceive what is right without respect to what the law demands. And once the individual perceives what is right, he is responsible to act upon it. An individual must act upon his own light, according to his own lights. In English, we talk about acting according to your own light. We have another phrase, march to the drummer that you hear. March to the beat of a different drummer. Act according to your own light. That means according to the light that is within you, the understanding of what is right. And he acts according to his own lights, his own understanding, when he follows through and saves the fugitive. So, in this case, Conrad is reaching into the living principle and pulling out truth. And we are able to understand a little bit more of what it means to be a human being because we've read the story. Or really, in this case, because we've read Levis's commentary on the story. And because we are reading the first chapter of the living principle, in which Levis makes explicit, makes plain, his understanding of the living principle. And about how creative literature can be a window into a deeper reality. Creative literature can be a mirror of humanity in which we can look in and see ourselves in a different way. This is how we grow as human beings, by consuming literature, great literature. When I say consuming, I mean taking it in and digesting it, by allowing great literature to provoke us to meditate, to provoke us to see the connections between our experiences and our understanding of moral virtue. So this is how it works. All right, I think we should stop there. The next paragraph will require more time than we'd like to spend today, I think. Do you agree, Alessandro, that we should stop here? Okay, it's a little short today, but we are not going to be taking questions, and we'll come back next week. I do want to mention that I am receiving applications to study in my home for the year 2011, particularly January, February, and March. There is still room. If you would like to come, please get an application off of the website and send a copy of it to me and to Silvio with a $10 application fee. And maybe you can still come and study in January or February or March, or all three or two of the three. So send an application. I hope to meet you. See you later. Bye-bye.